Ba-da-da-ba-ba.
Okay, go for it.
Thanks, Hope. All right. Hello, everybody. So great to see you guys. Happy Tuesday. Happy October. Um, we are looking forward to a great meeting with you guys today. As a reminder, this meeting is a nice 3 hours long. And so that being said, take care of yourselves during the meeting today. If you need to step away to get water, if you need to step away to use the restroom, if you need to step away to get food, do what you need to do so you can be as present with us as possible. We know it's a long time and it's over your lunch hour. So just know that we'll continue on through the meeting, but if at any point you need to take a moment for yourself, please do so. We will have a 5-minute break. Well, depending on how quickly we can get through things, 5 to 10 minute break in the middle of the meeting for all of that stuff as well, just so you guys know. Alrighty, so our meeting objectives for today are to start with wrapping up our home size discussion. As you guys might remember, we presented the survey results on home size at the end of meeting 15, and now we want to have the discussion around what we want to do to wrap up that discussion. And then the bulk of today's meeting will be spent discussing and straw polling around the proposals the board submitted for section R408. And then at the very end of our meeting today, we will be sharing with you guys the process for how you'll review the first commercial code draft, which, drumroll, is available as of today. So just a huge kudos to Adam and Anna and Hope and whoever else was involved in that. It was a huge lift, and so we're really excited to have that code draft to share with you guys today, and we'll be giving you more information on how you will be interacting with it and providing your feedback to us on it. So how that looks in our agenda, like I said, we'll start today with the home size discussion, and then we'll move into our R408 proposals. So we'll do a couple of those ahead of the break. We'll take a break around 12:20, 12:30, just depending on where we land with our conversation. And then we'll roll through the remainder of our R408 proposals. I will flag that the proposals that are related to changing existing credit point values, I don't know that we'll have time to roll through today. We will at least try to give board members an opportunity to share their proposals. And we may have to do that actual surveying after the fact to ask you guys your thoughts on that, because I think we'll run out of time. Yeah, Carolyn.
Thanks, Kim. Just a clarifying question related to the residential survey that I think you sent us out the reminder on, and how that's going to be dispositioned in our coming meetings. Can you offer any clarity around that? Part of the reason I'm asking is, and I think I shared this comment with you all, as I went through that, I found a lot of them I wanted more context around. And, you know, it was great when you all shared like the rationale from the person proposing it, but I noticed that wasn't present for all of them. And like even mine, where I know I sent like a study to support why I was proposing the change I was proposing, like it didn't make it into the survey. And so I'm just a little bit, like I personally struggled to know how to respond to some of those, because I was lacking, you know, some of the rationale behind it. And there were some really nuanced things about it that I wasn't fully tracking. And then I was particularly confused, honestly, my own issue with the whole home size RC 5,000 square foot set of questions and what was actually being proposed and how that translated. I know we have the home size discussion wrap up that we're going into now, and I'm trying to understand the intersectionality behind what was in the survey and what we're talking about today.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. I think you bring up a number of really good points. So I will preface all of this by saying, unfortunately, for better or for worse, we are time limited and time bound to get all of this stuff done so we can get a code draft out to the public by the end of the year. So how we plan to use the follow-up survey results is similar to how we have in our previous surveys. Look at simple majorities and apply simple majorities for each of the questions if folks like the proposal or didn't, to integrate those into the first code draft. To offer up a quick explanation on the rationale, we tried our best to include the rationale for board members that provided it. And just because of our sort of turnaround time on that survey, we did not have the opportunity to reach out to every board member who submitted a proposal in the residential survey to ask for their rationale. I realize that was maybe not the most seamless process. Again, just really trying to emphasize the sort of limited time aspect that we're running with here for some of these surveys. Carolyn, specifically to your rationale, we did include that link in the board resources, and we sent that out for the board to review. So apologies that didn't make it in the survey itself. I'm trying to remember the specifics. Adam, maybe you
Yeah,
can
as a clarification, I think in particular for today, I really want to understand it because I did not follow the recommendation on the over 5,000 home RC appendix, what goes in appendix, what goes in code body, whole set of questions that were at the end of the survey.
Yeah.
I didn't find, like, I just wasn't quite fully understanding what you all are what the proposal even was and how it related to some of the decisions we made. And I know home size is part of today's discussion. So are we going to talk about that? And if not, I think I'm going to strongly advocate. I think we need to understand what you're thinking there around how we're treating over 5,000 square foot homes and under 5,000 square foot homes related to what does or does not sit in the main body of the code and what goes into an appendix. Because I think that was not clear to me, at least. I can't speak for others, but I know that I don't feel prepared to make a decision around it without fully understanding that.
Yeah, and Carolyn, happy to chat offline and any other board members who have the similar question. But just quick answer is that we did the home size survey and we heard from the board that there was interest in having a different requirement for homes over 5,000 square foot. We asked the board in that survey what they wanted that requirement to look like, and the majority of responses said buildings over 5,000 square feet should be limited to just the ERI pathway and should be made to be compliant with Appendix RC. So in that, we presented that at the end of the last meeting, so I apologize. I know that we went quickly through that information. In our follow-up survey, we wanted to use that opportunity to ask everybody. Last meeting, you guys might recall, in R406, we decided to remove the renewable energy requirement from R406. And so as we were looking at, okay, the home size survey results tell us we want to use Appendix RC, which is an ERI score, for these large homes, how does that, we heard from board members in the survey, they want to be RC net zero, or they just want to use RC in some similar pathway. And so we were trying to understand better, do folks want to keep the renewable energy requirement in place for those larger homes, or do we want to keep it aligned with what we decided for R406? So that, I think, is the ecosystem we were trying to ask the questions around. Today, we are not going to be discussing very large homes. The purpose of our home size discussion today is to talk about the medium tier threshold that the board voted that they would like to have in the home size survey. Happy to answer any follow-up questions, or maybe I don't know. Adam, do you want to add any other color to that explanation?
No, I think you generally covered it.
Okay. So I guess, Carolyn, does that answer your question? And maybe if not, we could connect offline and I could try to figure out a way to better communicate with the full board what those questions were about before everyone needs to submit the survey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who else has gone through and tried to complete the survey and whether they encountered the same issue that I did. I guess I'll just name this. I don't necessarily need to have another discussion. I think I'm a little concerned about, in the absence of making sure we're all clear on what we're agreeing to, that, we're just going to be spending more time on the refining the draft code rather than informing the draft code. But I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, well, I appreciate that feedback, Carolyn, and like I said, if there's anything we can do to help, please let me know. Yeah, I just want to reiterate, as Adam has said a few times in our meetings, that we will have multiple chances for the board to review the draft code, and given that we had so much content to get through in such a short amount of time, we recognize a lot of that had to be moved offline for surveys, and that's not the ideal way to get through any of this. And I think Adam and I are both in agreement on that. But in order to make sure we hear and honor and ask about everybody's proposals and get through them all, this was sort of our best opportunity to do so. So we know it's not a perfect system, and we appreciate you guys sticking with us through this first iterating process. Andrew.
For initial purposes, what is the current purpose of the home size discussion for today?
The current purpose of our home size discussion today is going to be to, and hopefully you guys took a look through the pre-work, which I sent out, which outlined our discussion for the day. But it's going to be to figure out what we want to do for a medium-sized threshold, tier home threshold. The board voted to add a home size tier somewhere between 2,000 to 5,000 square feet and change the requirements for homes of that size. So today we're going to talk about what that square footage threshold is and what the change in requirements might look like.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Alrighty. Cool. Thanks, everyone. So quick reminder, I share this every time, but just a reminder for you guys to please be checking public comments and bringing forward those that you would like to discuss for within our meetings. Alrighty, so now we're going to move into the approval of meeting minutes, and I want to just say thanks to Rob, if he is on the call, for catching that when I sent that PDF out that it like layered all three of the last page's notes on top of each other. I did not mean to have that happen, so hopefully you guys got the updated notes from me that had all of that formatting fixed. Would love to open up the floor if a board member would like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
This is Kevin. I move to approve the minutes.
Thanks, Kevin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. All in favor of approving meeting 15 meeting minutes, please say aye.
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 I
Aye.
Thank you all. Any board members that would not like to approve meeting 15 minutes, please say nay. Okay, wonderful. Meeting 15 meeting minutes are approved, and we will get those added to CEO's website. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so home size. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to be discussing the medium tier home size threshold during today's discussion. I sent out the slides for you all to take a look at ahead of time for this discussion, so hopefully you've reviewed the questions we're going to ask today and understood where you'd like to fall on this. A quick reminder of our survey results. So looking up top at the summary of our majority votes that we received was that the board voted to, or I guess the majority of folks would like to add a medium tier threshold with that square footage threshold to be defined. We want to keep one tier for large and very large homes rather than setting an additional tier for very large homes, which is at the 5,000 square foot limit. And we want to require that those large and very large homes use ERI compliance via Appendix RC. Yeah, Rob, I see your hand.
Yep. Quick question. Did we decide with any certainty whether we're talking about conditioned square foot or living space above grade?
Thank you for that question, Rob. I believe that was answered in the survey. And Adam, I'm going to look to you. I can also pull up those survey results really quick.
Yeah, I believe the board did do a preliminary vote on it, but I will also acknowledge
Oh.
that since then,
Yeah.
there have been a lot of public comments come in regarding that particular issue, so it might be one we want to revisit.
Thanks, Adam. And I actually am remembering, I think we did a straw poll on that 2 meetings ago. So I don't even think that was in the survey. That was a straw poll.
In my recollection is that we decided in that straw poll to do conditioned floor area, total conditioned floor area. And I guess we could pose that to the board as to whether or not that's something we need to revisit based on any of the public comments that were submitted. But we can also, the other thing we can also do is take that as what we are doing for this first draft, again, remembering that we can continue to iterate on this.
Thanks, Adam. I see Tim, and then we'll go Andrew and Carolyn.
Yeah, thanks. Can you give us the vote count of that from the survey for voting to change to add a medium home threshold, please?
Yes, certainly. I think I'll just need to pull it up, Tim. So actually I might ask Adam or
Yeah, Tim,
or
I
my
can look it up and I'll drop it in the chat, Tim.
Thank you. Yeah, Tim, we unfortunately only 12 board members took the survey. So again, reiterating the continued importance of your guys' attention and focus on those surveys, because if we don't hear from you, we don't have a good way of knowing what you guys are leaning. Andrew.
Yes, I recall brief and quick and very vocal discussion on the floor area. I don't think it was well discussed. I don't recall an actual well thought straw poll. I would very strongly encourage people to revisit this. There's a lot of public comment, and I disagree personally and professionally with much of the discussion that was proposed.
Thanks, Andrew. I also have a similar recollection that it was a quick discussion at the end of 2 meetings ago. So Adam, maybe we can flag that as a follow-up for the board just to figure out how we want to capture that discussion in future meetings. But thank you, Andrew, for that comment. Carolyn.
Yeah, following with Andrew's comment, Adam represented something that is inconsistent with what I thought we agreed. I don't think we fully agreed to getting the definition of conditioned space. I think we named it as a problem that we needed to get clear on what the definition was, and then that should inform the home size thresholds. Because again, I think what I believe to be true is that when you see average home size, which was used to pick the 5,000 square foot and also to inform the median, it was above grade floor area, not total conditioned space. So I think I think I'm fine, setting a threshold. I think we need to get really consistent really fast on how we're treating below grade space. And then use that to select the appropriate average and large tier thresholds, so that because in this, using 5,000 square foot, every home in my neighborhood would be considered a large home. And I can assure you that mine is not an affluent neighborhood that I live in, but it's simply the function of whether you're including below grade floor area.
Thanks, Caroline. So I do want to just pull up, these are the meeting notes from meeting 14, which were voted on and approved by the board. And at the end of our meeting in meeting 14, we did a straw poll on what should be covered in our square footage requirements. We had 11 votes, which was the majority in this meeting, to include conditioned floor area above and below grade. And so that is the assumption that I think our team was moving forward with based on the results of that straw poll. So I'm just going to leave this here for you guys to read for a second. But this is where we landed at the end of meeting 14. And I understand we go through so much detail in these meetings.
Yeah,
so
and I'm looking at the very next bullet that follows that. So what I'm saying here is that if we're doing above and below total floor area, then I think we need to inform the threshold piece, because I think you used an average home size. My understanding from 2 discussions ago was that those thresholds, selecting the 5,000 as the definition of large home, was informed by an analysis of average home size and what was on the fringes of and constituted a large home. I don't believe that if you use this definition of conditioned floor area, including below grade space, that an average is going to be larger, like the average point is going to be larger than what you're representing. So that's all I'm trying to say, is I don't think we've fully brought those 2 pieces together in a way that we've affirmed as a board collectively, because I don't think we've seen the 2 things together yet.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Kristen?
Isn't the point here, though, that conditioned space uses energy, and this is an energy code at heart? For me, if it's 5,000 conditioned space of new floor area, that's pretty huge.
But that's like an average home, or just slightly over an average home.
That's accurate, Carolyn.
Carolyn, I mean, I can,
So, yeah, go for
I
it.
think we can say that the information that we have on what an average new home is in Colorado, which was talking about full square footage, it was not talking about just above grade, was just over 2,000 square feet for a single family.
I don't think that's accurate. I think it's.
That's not
if you-
accurate. Our
It's not
average
accurate. If you're
above grade is
using-
above 2,000.
Okay, so I guess explaining Adam and I's process here, right? We did a straw poll with the board in meeting 14 to come to this conclusion. We then sent a follow-up survey to the board after this had been agreed upon to ask you all how you would like to manage the square footage threshold. So I think in our eyes, this had been a result. This is how we were moving forward. And then we asked you all to respond to the survey with this in mind. If that was unclear, I apologize. And I guess, Adam, I'm in a place where I'm not sure if, you know, I would like to try to have the conversation on home size today because I think it's an important one. I don't think we can go back and revisit. We just don't have time to go back and revisit the polls that we've already done. And I'm not trying to be unjudicious in this process. I'm just trying to make sure we cover all of the topics we need to cover with this board because there's a lot we got to get through. I'll go to Tim.
Thank you. Could you remind me and the board, I don't have time to open up my code book, that the existing threshold, 5,000 square feet, that is in a couple of different places in the IUCC, is that considering total conditioned floor area above and below grade, or is that even defined in the current 5,000 square foot threshold? Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. It is, I believe, defined, and Hope, I might look to you to see if you can answer that question more eloquently than I.
I have it opened if that helps.
I'll say, I think it's above grade. I think it's 5,000 square feet above grade.
It says of living space located above grade plane.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with that said, I think it'd be maybe a good idea to maybe bring that back forward for the board, because if we did a straw poll, I'm not sure if we asked that question when we did this other straw poll to now include below grade, just for consistency. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Will?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that since there's a sort of informational question here, that we should maybe put a pin in this, go through and sort of continue our discussions around what we're going to do with some medium size. My understanding from the conversation is that people have been interested in having that medium size threshold start somewhere around the average size of new homes that are built in Colorado, so that we're not capturing, you know, the below average homes in that. And there appears to be a bit of a sort of factual disagreement on what that number is, above grade versus total conditioned area. I don't know that we can resolve that today, so would suggest that we just move ahead with the conversation, confirm that information, and then come back to the discussion about what that appropriate number is.
Okay, thanks, Will. Carolyn?
Yeah, I mean, I would use what would be a bell curve strategy for defining what is the small, what is the medium, and what is the large, where the medium is roughly, you know, 1 or 2 standard deviations from the average, and then anything above that 2 standard deviations is large, and anything below that is small. I mean, that would be a normal statistical methodology for trying to define what is average. And preponderance around that average. So that would be the methodology I think I put in my comments way back when we did the surveys, to use a normalization strategy for defining those parameters.
Okay, so I think what we're going to do, because Will, while I agree it might be helpful to have the home size discussion today, I think that we will continuously get tripped up on the square footage threshold as being the first thing that needs to be decided before we figure out what additional requirements might land on a medium tier home. So I guess, Adam, do we want to confirm we want a medium tier home, or should we just skip this altogether?
I think we can at least confirm that, because I think we can set those square footage thresholds at another time, determined based on the follow-up to this question.
Okay. All right. So regrounding in the survey results, which is where we got all of these questions, there was a vote to add a medium tier threshold. So we're going to ask folks what that medium tier threshold might land at. We can go from there. So the reason we're confirming that we wanted that medium size threshold is because in the survey, we had a majority of board members indicate that they wanted to add a medium size home tier threshold. When we asked further in the survey what they wanted to change about the requirements for medium homes, very few board members replied to that question. So we want to make sure that we are thinking about this the right way and adding this threshold if you guys actually want it. Again, we have a large, very large threshold, starts at 5,000 square feet and greater. And then this would be sort of the piece that sits right below that, the threshold, square footage threshold right below that. Does the board want to add a medium home size tier? And really, I'm happy to adjust this question just so there's no weirdness as we vote. This would be, below 5,000 square feet, but obviously greater than 0 square feet. So that's what we're voting on, right? Is to add an additional tier here. Is the language okay here? I'm not locking us into a 2,000 to 3,000 square foot threshold. That was just the language we used to make this a bit simpler. Okay.
Yeah, if you can change it from TBD to TBD, I would be more comfortable with the vote.
So Carolyn, I think and again, I would look to the board here. There was a vote to add this as the large, or to keep this threshold in place from where it is in the IECC. And so are we okay leaving the 5,000 square feet there?
As long as we acknowledge that we still have this open question around whether that's inclusive or not inclusive of below grade floor area.
Okay. Thanks, Carolyn. Andrew?
It's easier for somebody like me to even consider this question if the 5,000 square feet is above grade plane. I don't even know if I can consciously abstain from this question without it being from above grade plane.
Yeah, sorry, Elizabeth.
I was just going to say, I agree with Andrew. I'm really struggling with this. What is the concept of medium? Do we need it if it does or does not include above grade plane? I'm just really struggling with this now. Sorry.
That's okay. I think we tried to be iterative with this process, and I think there might be some lines that got crossed in our communication about how we were using our previous straw polls to advance this home size conversation. And so perhaps this is something we just need to entirely revisit. But Ron and then Tim.
Yeah, I would just agree that I think without, to try and address this in abstract, figure out what the rules should be for a particular category of houses without actually being able to think about the houses themselves, I think it's a little disconnected from the building reality. And that's kind of what I use to figure out what might make a good rule, is to ground truth it with the actual houses that we're talking about. And so to make the rules and have an abstract idea, a placeholder for what the numbers are, I think it just makes the conversation really confused in my mind.
Okay. I think with that, we're going to skip the home size discussion for the day. I don't think that it's worth going down this rabbit hole. Adam and I will reconvene to figure out how we want to bring that topic back up with the board. Again, just flagging, we don't have any meeting time left for this discussion. And so this will likely need to come through surveys in order to address this sort of thing. So we will leave that there, and we will come back to this at a future time. Kim, and then Ron, and then I'm gonna skip us along to 408.
Just one thing that might be helpful is we have a lot of jurisdictions, including the ones that I'm in San Miguel County, Telluride Mountain Village, that already have categories for home sizes. And whether they include below grade conditioned area or not in those home size categories, I think there's a relative amount of consistency about what the average size of home is that is framing that middle category. So since, at least in my mind, I think we're mostly talking about communities like mine that have a lot of large homes and medium versus other cities that tend toward smaller size homes. I think it might be helpful to use what is already established in different communities across the state as a framework to help provide the baseline for this discussion. And I don't know if that's kind of where things have already come from. I know that's where I've been thinking from, but that might be helpful for us to look at.
Thanks, Kim. I think that's a really helpful suggestion. And so we can follow up with that offline. Ron?
I'm sort of, in fact, I'm very hesitant to suggest this, but I'm thinking about the idea of trying to resolve this house size issue in a survey. And I know I, for one, really appreciate and benefit in my thinking from hearing the voices of the other people on the committee. And when we do a survey, we all get to sort of espouse our opinions, but I don't get to hear how other people are looking at this same question. So I don't know that we'll get to as good of a conclusion without that discussion. And I know we're there's a lot of constraints on our time, but I'm kind of hesitant to leave it to the survey where we all are in our own worlds and just voicing our opinions and don't get that benefit of the discussion. Now, maybe there's additional meetings that need to get scheduled, which is why I'm really hesitant to suggest this, because that's really hard to do. But I know I would benefit from hearing how others on this committee are thinking about these things.
Adam, do you want to answer? I appreciate that, Ron, and I think maybe the one thing that we could do is next meeting, our focus was going to be on R403, which was identified as a priority for the board to discuss in a meeting. That could be removed as a priority and shifted to the home size discussion. Again, I think, I want to make sure that I'm hearing from all board members before making that change. And so maybe folks could drop their thoughts in the chat. We're happy to make that pivot if that would be helpful. I'll go Hope and then Kevin.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a little bit of this hang up on the category of what you're calling it and whether a home is considered to be middle or they're considered to be a large home. And maybe the suggestion should be changing it from the medium title to a standard sized home. I don't know if that'll have any relevance on it. And there is a definition of what a grade plane is. So I don't know if that would be helpful in determining how the conditioned floor area is. The majority of it would be considered above grade plane. So
thanks, Hope. Kevin?
Yeah, it's in the spirit of Ron's comment about the feedback. There's some very strong opinions about not including all conditioned space. And I'm just curious what the rationale there is. I think Kristen mentioned before, if we're trying to create a code for energy efficiency, what is the reluctance that people have in addressing all conditioned square footage? Is it a case of there's an unfinished basement and that's not going to hit it, but that would still have insulation requirements? So that's one thing. And I guess the second question would be, if we're establishing that middle range, is that suggesting that it's a different set of criteria, that by building a more reasonable size home, that are we making that less stringent from an energy performance point of view? And I'm not sure who that question is to, other than maybe some of the folks that are so passionate about only above grade.
Yeah.
What's the desire to keep out all conditioned space?
Yeah, as a clarification, Kevin, I'm not opposed to keeping all conditioned space in our consideration. I think my issue is that the 5,000 number is based on above grade and is intended to represent a non-standard home using Hope's terminology. And I think we've mixed apples and oranges together in trying to determine what's an appropriate threshold and what does that threshold measure, whether it's a all conditioned space or just above plane space. So I 100% can support all conditioned space, but then I'm just saying the 5,000 number has to be raised to be more consistent with something that is more than 2 standard deviations from an average. So I think we are misinterpreting a set of data in determining what is average, and then it's bringing the two together that creates the issue.
Okay, Rob.
Yeah, I think this is a question for Hope. Is the 20 is living space above grade a new description of space in 24 compared to 21? Was 21 historically, because I'm looking through 21 and I really only see conditioned floor space. Is this a new definition of square footage in 24?
And you're referring to the definition for living space or the reference for living space?
Is the reference to living space we're debating right now new for 24, or was it also defined similarly in prior iterations of the code?
Not in the energy code. It is listed for other codes, but as far as the energy code goes, that the definition that's in the 24 is new.
Historically, has it just been conditioned floor space?
As far as size wise is concerned?
Yes. For the purposes of our discussion.
For the purposes of this discussion?
Yeah, has square footage historically been conditioned floor space?
I would say not overall. Not when it comes to as far as the energy code has been. There hasn't been an emphasis on a size of a structure as far as residential is concerned. So all of that is a new concept. When you go onto the commercial side, there are different delineations, like it'll say gross conditioned floor area, and then sometimes it's just going by gross floor area. So there isn't just one set parameter all throughout the code. And that probably didn't really answer your question, but that's the best that I have for you under these conditions.
Thank you, Hope. Thanks, Rob. Andrew?
Hope, my understanding between 21 and 24 is that this exists initially and only in the 24 is a indication to include additional option credits for anything 5,000 square foot above grade plane. This didn't exist in 21 or anything prior as to this discrete topic. But most references, my recollection and belief, have always historically been above grade plane. And it may not, I didn't vote for the medium category. The 5,000 square feet as intended was intended to be for large homes. In the turn, a 2,500 square foot above grade and include conditioned just gets right there at 5,000 square foot condition. And I don't think anybody, at least I don't recall anybody here intending to take 5,000 feet above grade plane and attempt to get close to that or at that with a conditioned floor area. This is a new concept that I don't think anybody has any use and experience in this particular section. Hence why I'm at least so adamant that the above grade plane should stay if there is a medium category, and wasn't a vote for a medium category.
And you are correct, Andrew. Prior to the 2024, there wasn't anything in there concerning the sizes. An above grade plane is a new concept within the energy code itself for the 2024. Prior to that, the delineation that was utilized was above grade walls and below grade. And that's where there was some determination, but residentially, the below grade walls was as long as you had 50%, it was at the 50% mark that it became a below grade wall. So there was quite a few walls that would be considered as above grade walls, but there was no prior delineation about above grade plane until the 24.
Thanks, Hope. Okay, our last comment is going to be Will, so I'll pass it to you, and then I think we do need to move on in the essence of time.
That's actually what I was going to say. Is it seems like we just need to revisit it once we get the data on total square footage versus above grade square footage for Colorado. So,
thanks, Will. Great segue. So I think what we can plan to do is plan to discuss this at our final residential meeting. And so we can adjust our syllabus and our agenda to accommodate this conversation at our next meeting. And we will do our best to pull the relevant data that we can to help inform that discussion ahead of time. If board members have resources you'd like us to look into or would like us to share with the board related to home size, I would ask that you guys email us those so we can make sure they're included. So with that said, thank you all for just bearing with us as we navigate this. And we're going to move on now to our proposals for R408. So to start, we are going to start with one of the proposals we received from our board member to strike R408. And if depending on the outcome of this, it may change some of the next questions that we have. So Andrew, this was your proposal. As a reminder, how we're going to go through the rest of today's meeting. We are going to give 1 minute for the board member to give their proposal. Because this proposal is pretty large, we've allocated slightly more time for discussion here, but we'll have between 5-10 minutes of discussion and Q&A for each proposal. I am asking so nicely that we keep our comments brief today, so we can make sure we get through as much as we can. At the end of the discussion, we will be conducting straw polls on each one of the board members' proposals. So that's the format. You guys are familiar with it. Shouldn't be a surprise. And with that, Andrew, I will pass it over to you with 1 minute on the clock for your proposal.
Many of us have only begun to get acclimated to the 2021 IECC. In discussions with the NAHB, the leading builders of America, and those builder representatives that were on the consensus committee for the 2024, no person or party can well articulate the intent holistically in the intent for the vast amount of options that are presented in R408 are historical, having to live with these in other jurisdictions that have attempted to go down this route have not been favorable in other states, including the state of Washington. Hence, the current R408 is new to many of us and is more simple and achievable if left as is, or in the alternate, the entirety of the new R408 could be struck or could be put as an appendix.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. So with that, we would like to open it up for board Q&A and discussion. So if you have questions for Andrew about his proposal or any thoughts about his proposal, feel free to raise your hand and we'll discuss. And then we'll move to a straw poll after this. We'll start with Jess.
Thank you. My question would be if R408 is struck or moved to an optional appendix, how do we ensure similar energy performance on homes built across all of the other pathways like R405 and R406?
With that, and again, discussing with NAHB, the LBA, and including the leadership at ResNet, no study has yet been undertaken on the effect of R408 under the ERI or the HERS index. That this R408 in its entirety seems to be not well thought through in its effect, and potentially premature a code cycle. The current R408 was more simple to understand and achieve. The new, nobody that I know of in the industry, all the way up the committee at ResNet, is only beginning to address how may one even do this? And that should have come before this was even introduced.
What about, sorry, Kim, I have a follow-up question. Something that we have heard a lot from builders in our community is they like options and they like having both a prescriptive and performance pathway. For some folks, especially homeowner builders, they find that doing the prescriptive pathway, which is this R408 pathway, is easier for them to follow than like the performance-based pathway of R406. So how would this help builders and homeowner builders who are looking for a prescriptive pathway?
The current R408 could remain. I mean, I say this as a builder, there are many builders that are only just getting used to, and even the statewide code that helped accelerate many jurisdictions throughout this state are only beginning to get used to the current R408, and there may not be anything wrong with keeping the current R408 and delaying the other until the next code cycle, until many in the industry better understand its intent and effect.
Thanks, Andrew. Carolyn.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something, Andrew. Are you proposing to be more consistent with 2021, or when you say keep the current R408, but wait, I guess I didn't totally follow what you were proposing in terms of.
Potentially that may need more clarity for me, that in making the comments, in speaking with many in the industry, my initial sense was the weight and complexity was challenging for anybody attempting to take the prescriptive approach, and most builders really were against the weight of this. The current R408, because it is the current R408, was more manageable, and it is really something that is new for many of us. And I would propose and stay comfortable with keeping the current R408 as is under the 24 state code.
When you say current, which code are you referring to?
In the 2021 IECC?
Yes, it has additional efficiency package options.
Because there's lots of jurisdictions that haven't adopted the 21, so they're not building to that either.
Well, I say current in the sense that as the state code was formalized and published, those that adopted the 21 code adopted it as they could amend it. Those that didn't adopt it in time, once they were to adopt it, they would take the state code as it was finalized. To the
What state code?
I think he's referring to the current state minimum requirement, which is the 2021 IECC plus the model electric and solar ready code.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions for Andrew about this proposal, or other comments from the board?
Just one clarifying question. Andrew used the term weight, that they were uncomfortable with the weight. Is it, can you clarify what you mean by weight? Is it the total points? Is it just the complexity of this section because of the increased number of options? I guess I'm just still trying to seek to understand.
And that in speaking with leadership at ResNet and speaking with others at the Leading Builder of America and speaking with others at the NAHB, just R408 itself is not even begun to be understood as to what each measure number, what its impact on the HERS index would be, what its cost impact would be, how this all works in context. Now, there may be such a plethora of options that one could say, well, we got so many choices that it shouldn't matter. That a conscious study as to how one would go through this as a residential builder has not yet been commenced. And the totality of the options and each individual option and the credit value per option and the weight of the credit values per climate zone and what is a possible way, this is just only beginning to start being looked at and just wholly seems premature and should wait another code cycle.
And then clarifying question for our code experts. I think my understanding of R408, I mean, I agree that it can't perfectly predict energy savings across every application of one of the credits, right? It's hard to say the exact net energy savings based on every individual use of one of these measures. But my understanding was that its foundation is still under the modeling that P&L did to try and look across kind of averages and uses, because the intent is that the scores are indicative of the estimated reduction in energy consumption for each potential measure. So like something gets 12 points if it's, or something like 6 points, the one that gets 6 points is delivering 50% less overall energy savings on average across a model building stock using the, I think it's using some of the home models that have been developed and then P&L's model. Is that inaccurate, folks?
Kevin, at least from persons I speak with, and even the modelers and raters that we work with across the country, and we work with many raters, is that this was based upon the total cost. And if this is going to change from a cost-based approach to a consumption-based approach, it would be persons have only begun to assess this. This whole table seems to have come without sufficient involvement and participation from those in the industry, and too much of it seems to have been based on states from the Pacific Northwest that are attempting to go down this road without enough involvement as to what that road actually is. And I go back to the 21, that the simplicity of the current R408 is more manageable in a prescriptive approach, that builders are more likely to keep the context. And there's already enough other incremental changes that have been included in either the performance or the prescriptive approach. And there's still, I think, maybe a consensus belief amongst the current board that maybe the ERI is what people actually may prefer. But from a prescriptive path to keep that, this table mixes and matches and inherently pulls in the ERI when it really wasn't intended to be pulled in a prescriptive approach, because you can't prove this without going to the ERI. And that wasn't the intent.
Thanks, Andrew. I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm going to need to cut you off because we're running up on 10 minutes.
Okay.
So Hope, I would love if you could help address Carolyn's question, and then Tim, I'll run it over to you for a quick comment question, and then I think we need to move to a straw poll. So thanks, everybody.
Carolyn, and you were referring to whether how those numbers and the percentages and so forth were developed, and you are correct. They did utilize PNNL, and they did it obviously by the climate zones. Now, of course, when you have climate zones, you can have a climate zone that would be at 200 feet above sea level and then 12,000 feet above sea level. So there is going to be a little bit of nuances to it, but it is an overall, and they did utilize PNNL as a biased entity to produce those numbers for the calculations.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, and we'll ask that we say it in a headline for our final two comments, just so we can keep on schedule. So thanks, Tim, and then Elizabeth.
Thank you. For clarity, I hope you can help, I think, Kim, but the 2021 R408 just gave a series of options, different options. And the way I read it, the big difference in 2024 is now it requires you to pull at least or get at least 10, unless you hit that 5,000 square foot large house, our favorite discussion. Then you need another 5. So that's the big change, the way I'm seeing that. I mean, to Andrew's point, that our builders, it's, we've been under the 21 for a year and a half, and they've been able to comply using the current C408 with those types of options. But I would agree with on Andrew's side of things. I don't know of any jurisdiction that's adopted a 2024, much less, if they have used it to get any kind of good data of what that impact, especially the financial impact, just on the base going to the 2024. So that concerns me, that if the board here is even looking at amending the 408 for a statewide code, and we don't even know how it works yet, that concerns me. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Elizabeth?
Yeah, we've helped clients document residential compliance under the 2021 IECC. So we do have some familiarity with using R408 and helping developers choose options under R408. I actually did not see the new R408 as an issue, partly because all of the same options for compliance exist, like an improved UA, that you could absolutely comply using that. You can absolutely comply using all ducts in conditioned space, like in climate zone 5. All ducts in conditioned space is a current option under R408. Or I should say 2021 option. It is also a 2024 option. You get 11 points. I mean, boom, you're done. That's actually been our most popular option. So I would see projects just continuing to do that. I also want to just remind everybody that the envelope requirements in most of the climate zones actually were reduced between 2021 and 2024. Like for example, climate zone 5, we went from an R60 roof in 2021 to an R49. So if we don't have at least a little bit more efficiency in R408, we'll actually be going down in overall building efficiency for the residential
That was limited
code.
to just the attic, though, my recollection.
Foundation and
Hey, well, great questions, great comments. I think we'll move to our straw poll on this proposal. So our options will be, and I actually think we did not discuss an alternative approach, so I'm going to remove option B here. We have that always in as a contingency as we go through these meetings, because we know how often that happens. Okay, so I think the question to the board right now is, does the board want to strike section R408 entirely? And option A is yes, option B is no, and option C is abstain.
Kim, quick question. I don't want to interject, but could one of the A, B, or C keep the 2021 R408?
So Kim, I think we could potentially do a follow-up poll. If the board decides to strike this section, then it's irrelevant. If the board decides not to strike this section, then I guess that could be a follow-up question.
Adam, I might be interpreting that differently. I feel like if the board would vote to strike this section, it would open up the door to what is the prescriptive pathway, which might mean that the 2021 is filled in as the default. Okay, so I guess, Andrew, are you proposing in striking this that we move back to the 2021 code? Because if that is your proposal, then that is what I will include here rather than elimination of the prescriptive pathway altogether.
Upon further discussion, I would propose that.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, thank you guys. Appreciate this. Okay, so just to add some extra clarification to Andrew's proposal. So if we're voting to strike our section 408, it would be to replace it with that 21 IECC, or the board can vote no to not strike the 2024 section for R408, which is option B, or board members may abstain from this vote. Okay, so if board members would like to vote for option A to strike section R408 in the 2024 IECC and replace it with that section in 2021 IECC, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 3 votes for option A. Thank you all. You can lower your hands. Option B, if board members would not like to strike this section, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 10 hands raised. Thank you guys for option B. And if any board members would like to abstain, please raise your hand now. Okay, I see 4 hands for abstain. Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you, everyone. The board majority here is to not strike section R408, and so we will move forward with that in mind, which opens up the rest of our discussion for the day. Thank you guys for that. Kristen, Zach, are those just lingering hands, or do you guys have questions? Okay, I'm assuming they're lingering.
Lingering hands.
Thanks, Zach. Okay. So the next section we wanted to cover today were board proposals to remove credit that is within our 408 currently. We have 4 proposals that were submitted in this category, we'll call it. And so again, what we'll do here is really try to keep it tight with a proposal from the board, Q&A discussion, and then straw polling. And again, I just want to recognize and I'm empathizing with you guys that I know this isn't that much time to get through all of this stuff, and we're doing the best we can here. So with that, this is an overview of the 4 proposals you'll hear today, and we'll just jump right in. And Rob, you'll be up first, but we can go through yours one at a time because they're all kind of different in their outcomes.
Sure. My concerns with the renewable energy option are the same as they've been in every other time we've discussed. That it really doesn't necessarily apply. It's energy, it's generation, it's not conservation. It's changing how energy is dumped into the system instead of pulling energy out of the system, and the interconnections and system designs and effects that it's going to have the distribution grid or is going to have on distribution system design, substation design are all costs that are unaccounted for. If we do, onesie twosie houses with PV on top of with PV added, is certainly can be absorbed, generally speaking, by the grid. But if we start making this a very widespread, it's going to become it creates upstream challenges for us. So I'd rather the conservation code focus on energy conservation, pulling energy out of the system instead of how it's dumped into it.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, we'll open it up for Q&A and discussion. Any board members have questions or thoughts on Rob's proposal? Elizabeth?
My only thoughts are if the board chooses to accept this, that you have to make everything else align with it. So if you take away renewable energy as a benefit to this path, it's got to be considered under ERI and R405 as well.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Kim?
I guess this is just a question for Rob. The concerns that he has regarding increased renewable energy on the grid, as the state moves toward increased renewable energy overall, aren't those concerns things that utilities are needing currently to already address and predict and project for and plan for anyway? And the other thing that I just, from personal experience with homes, sometimes renewable energy is a very effective way for them to help reduce their utility bills, especially if they're putting in heat pumps and other sorts of electrical systems that previously were fossil fuel oriented. So this is a very cost effective and energy effective way for them to achieve points.
Sure. I don't dispute that it affects utility bills. I dispute that it's conservation. It just changes how energy is dumped into the system again. Our designs are at the utility scale, and on the transmission side of substations, these distributed energy resources are on the customer side of the substations and on the distribution circuits, and those are how we design those, given like long-term planning and scale, are fundamentally different than how we look at a distribution system designs.
Thanks, Rob. Kevin.
I think a point and a question. I guess it's still just an option. So it's not like this is insisting on the use of renewables. It's an option that people can choose. And in a net metering scenario, Rob, does the utility, in the event that everyone took this option and we really did create a problem for the grid, doesn't the utility have the ability to not receive that power back onto the grid if that was a concern?
I don't know off the top of my head the answer to that second question. Remind me of the first question again. I don't know that we have the ability to curtail purchases from over generation.
Yeah, the first one was just that it was a point that it's only an option. It's not requiring it. So I don't know that this is going to create a flood of new renewables that would overtax the grid.
Well, there are areas where we've seen new construction go up where on-site generation is used and or required as a compliance pathway, and we've run into issues of interconnecting of our distribution system in those communities, being able to interconnect those in any timely fashion. I mean, some of it, I guess I would, we're just running into difficulty interconnecting it because our system isn't designed for it.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Will, I thought I saw a hand, but did you have anything you wanted to share? It's okay if not.
No, what I was going to say has been said.
Okay. Thanks, Will. All right. Final questions, comments from the board? If not, we'll move to the straw poll. Okay, I'm seeing no hands. The question in front of the board today in regards to this proposal is, does the board want to remove on-site renewables as a credit option? Option A is yes, remove it. Option B is no, do not remove it. And option C is abstain. So if you'd like to vote for option A, which is yes to accept Rob's proposal and strike the on-site renewable energy as a credit, please raise your hand. Okay. Thanks so much. I see one vote for option A. You can lower your hand. As far as voting for option B, please raise your hand if you would like to vote for option B. Okay, thanks everyone. I see 13 votes for option B. And then option C, if anyone would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand now. Okay, I see 2 abstains. Thank you guys, you can lower your hands. So as far as the simple majority on this poll, we'll move forward with not accepting this proposal. And Rob, I'm gonna turn it right back to you for proposal number 2.
Yeah, I feel like this one's even more straightforward. I won't take my full minute. Ductwork should simply be inside the building envelope. I don't think there's a good reason to locate it outside of the envelope. And if it is, it maybe shouldn't be rewarded, especially at the scale we're talking about.
Thank you, Rob. All right, 6 minutes on the clock for Q&A and discussion from the board. Kim, we'll go to you first.
My interpretation of this option for obtaining points would be that it's trying to encourage and reward points for ductwork being at least 80% within conditioned space, versus kind of the other way around. I think if anything, I would be in support of changing the number here to being 90% or 100% versus removing it altogether.
There's a line item for 100%.
Yeah, sorry, Kim, we didn't put it on the screen, but there is also a credit for 100% of duct systems. I think the only reason we showed this one is because there's one for 100% in conditioned space. There's one for greater than or equal to 80% in conditioned space. And so we conferred with Rob, and
so we would, the 100% of, yeah. So there would, the credits would continue for 100% of ductwork inside the conditioned space. We would just not allow points for anything less than 100% of ductwork being inside the conditioned space.
Gotcha. I see that in the code now. I'm trying to keep up with all the pages on my screen. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim. Carolyn?
Then would you then also propose modifying R402 to specify a minimum percentage of ductwork that must be in the conditioned space? You're eliminating the credit.
Yeah, Rob, go for it.
We're not, we're talking about 408. I'm not talking about 402. Maybe it's something we would need to reconsider, but it wasn't what I had.
Yeah, I mean, I think
that you can,
yeah,
I think we leave 402 as it is. We just don't, we would I think leave 402 as it is. We just don't offer bonus points for, meeting a pretty a threshold that isn't that I don't perceive as being unusually difficult to meet.
Yeah, I see Elizabeth's hand up, and she might be able to answer some of this. I think what I'm just trying to understand is I see the reason for having these lower threshold points is an inherent presumption that you can meet the basic requirements of our 402 building thermal envelope, and as well as other wherever else the HVAC seats in within the ductwork, without having a significant portion of it in the conditioned space. And therefore you want to offer points to get more of it into the conditioned space. So I think if we get rid of the thing that encourages it, we should also make sure we backstop that that we're going to achieve the outcome this is intending to try and drive. So I'm just trying to understand that interrelationship in that proposal.
Thanks, Carolyn. I don't know if Kim or Elizabeth had an answer to that, but Kim, I see your hand up, and then I'll go to Elizabeth. I don't know if that was a lingering hand, Kim.
I'm sorry, apologize.
No worries. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I think it's important to read the rest of that credit because it gives some more context. Your slide sort of snips it off, but there is another sentence. After it says, not less than 80% of ductworks and completely inside conditioned space, blah, blah, blah. In addition, not more than 20% of ductwork is contained within building assemblies separated unconditioned from conditioned space as defined by blah, blah, blah. So that's like insulated floors, that kind of thing. It's not saying you can have ducts running willy-nilly outside the space. What this is doing is actually trying to provide a little bit more flexibility in construction, still giving folks credit for doing good installations here. I actually really like the extra flexibility that this particular credit allows for.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Andrew.
I hope Elizabeth, just conceptually, The 80%, my understanding was more that potentially a builder could maybe get the supply in and maybe not the return. And that the return may be 20%. I've seen some plans like that.
Yeah, good example.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Elizabeth. Other questions, comments on this proposal? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so I think we'll move to our straw poll. And I'll stop my timer before it scares me. Okay, so, oh, yep, Kim, go for it.
Sorry, just trying to really understand and think about the projects that I've seen as well, where there are some situations where 100% is not really able to be achieved very easily. And just wondering whether a compromise might be to just lower the points available so that instead of the points being almost as much as 100% of ductwork inside conditioned space, it's less than that.
I'll just offer the only challenge with lowering the points is we still have to stay consistent with the energy outcome that these are all supposed to be calibrated around.
Gotcha. So
Thank you, Carolyn. I was gonna bring up the same flag. Okay. Awesome. Not seeing any other hands. We'll move to our straw poll. So, does the board want to remove the credit option for ductwork outside of conditioned spaces? And, you know, again, sorry that the language in this slide is not clear. This is for the 80%. So let me just actually put that in, right? For just so we make sure we are very clear, crystal clear on what we would be voting on. So this would be to strike the 80% option, R408. So if
It
you
would be 80% inside conditioned space, not outside.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So option A is to accept this proposal, which would mean striking this as a credit option. Option B is not accepting this proposal, which means the credit option stays in, and option C is an abstain vote. Board members who would like to vote for option A, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you guys. I see 2 votes for option A. Option B, if board members like to vote for option B, please raise your hand. Okay. Thank you guys. I saw 11 hands for option B. For option C, please raise your hand if you'd like to abstain. Okay. Thank you guys. I see 2 votes for option C. So that is a majority to not accept this proposal. Thank you guys for your votes and discussion. And then finally, Rob, I'll turn it back to you for your last proposal in this section.
So the intent behind striking these as points, I think, speaks towards providing a nudge towards electrification and in new construction, in lieu, because this does maintain the points in table R408 for heat pumps with gas furnaces and heat pumps as with furnaces only and heat pumps with gas furnaces. So the intent of this is to ensure that is to try to create that nudge towards installing air source heat pumps in lieu of cooling only units. Furnaces alone, I did not ask to strike because there are large parts of the state where cooling is not necessary, and so keeping furnaces as a compliance pathway would be a good option within the model code.
Okay, thank you, Rob. All right, so open up discussion and questions from the board. So Carolyn, start us off.
I'll just admit I didn't follow that at all. I think 2.2 parentheses 2 is a SEER rating for a cooling unit. And the same with the next one down. And so I guess I'm not exactly understanding the link to heat pumps explicitly that you described, Rob. So I mean,
Sure.
I just didn't follow the argument.
Same
No,
here.
that's okay. I'm sorry. So with maybe Kim, it would help if we pulled up the full table. So within basically the HVAC section, there are options for high performance furnaces, high performance cooling, high performance furnaces, high performance furnace with cooling. What we're basically doing is all of the lines that offer points for cooling only systems, we're eliminating them. So we would still, so if you go down to,
Sorry, can you explain why? What's the point?
because then we would keep points for air source heat pumps. If you go like 408.2.2.9 includes high performance gas furnace with a heat pump. So it would, you look like you're continuing, you're still confused. And that's probably on me for not describing this very well. What are your concerns with like this is an opportunity?
So those credits aren't for systems that are cooling only. It's just credit
Correct.
for the efficient cooling. So you might have a heat pump system that meets this cooling efficiency but doesn't meet the heating efficiency. You'd be allowed to use this credit. It's not for a system that doesn't have heating. It's just it's for a system that may not meet the heating efficiencies of the combination credits.
Yeah, because the heat pump one is a cold climate heat pump, right? So the one 14. And then 10 is still a HSPF 2 of 7.8. So yeah, I think it's the lesser points for, sorry, that doesn't quite meet the heating.
If that's my misinterpretation of what cooling was, I'm comfortable with that. But I still think that there still could be an opportunity to probably nudge towards heat pumps instead of allowing points for cooling only units, because I think we're going to see, I imagine that cooling only units is going to be the path towards compliance here. It would be largely utilized.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, Carolyn, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rob's making a point in that it may be not fully be emphasizing the right outcome that we're trying to achieve. So maybe there's a wording thing here that at least calls out heat pump in the cooling language that goes along with this table to maybe emphasize that heat pumps fit in that category, because it just says cooling and SEER ratings. So I mean, we could say a cooling unit including heat pump with or something like that, just to emphasize it a little bit.
Honestly, the intent of the credit is to give you a point for an efficient condensing unit. It doesn't matter what the heating is. It's just giving you 1 point for efficient cooling.
And I guess just to make sure I'm super clear, Elizabeth, and you're looking, so a building in theory could put in an 80% efficient furnace, not qualify for any of the high performance furnace and cooling credits, and still get a point for a high efficiency condenser.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
And maybe just for clarity, Rob, was your intent to try to take away credit for furnaces, for like high efficiency furnaces?
No, we want to keep credits for high efficiency furnaces. What the intent is to take away credits for units that are cooling only.
Okay, I don't think that's
Sorry.
what this is. It's just giving you, if you don't meet the heating efficiency, but you do meet the cooling efficiency. And this is, I think, actually expanding on how like 2021 IECC is written. The way 2021 IECC R408 is, it's all or nothing. You have to meet all the cooling and all the heating. And this actually gives builders more flexibility because then they can mix and match a little bit more.
Okay. Any other questions, clarifying comments? Rob, any responses you want to throw out there to the group before we do a straw poll?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other hands. So with that, I think we will move to a straw poll. And so we've broken this straw poll into two parts. The first part is the striking of the high performance cooling credits. And then the second part is the striking of the high performance gas furnace and cooling credits, because both were included in Rob's proposal. So we'll start with does the board want to remove the credit options for high performance cooling? Option A is yes, option B is no, option C is abstain. So if you would like to strike the high performance cooling credits and vote for option A, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks. I see one vote for option A. If you would like to vote no on this proposal, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 12 votes for no. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. And if you would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 2 for abstain. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. And then we'll move into the next credit, the next part of Rob's proposal, which was to remove the credit options for cooling plus high performance gas furnace.
I feel like the majority's spoken. I can withdraw the next couple. I think I feel like I know what direction it's going to go.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Rob. So this question and proposal has been withdrawn. Okay. Next up in our removing credits is Kristen. And so
In the
Kristen,
interest of time, I withdraw this proposal.
okay, there we go. Thanks, Kristen. So we will move on then to a quick break. Almost on time. So we'll go ahead and break for about 5 minutes. If you guys can come back at 12:36, that would be great. See you soon. All right, everyone. I know it was short, but I am going to ask that we come back together. If you are near your computer, you can just make sure you're throwing a thumbs up or turn your camera on so I know you're back and we can jump back into the conversation. All right. Hello, hello. If you can hear me, come back to your computers. Hi, guys. Sorry, I know that was a short break. Thanks for coming back. Okay.
And can I do an audio check?
Yeah, I can hear you, Brad.
Wonderful. Having issues earlier.
Yeah, thanks for checking. Okay. Throw me a thumbs up if you're at your computer so I know that you are there. Great, great. Yeah, keep it up, keep it up. Okay. I'm not seeing hands from some folks, but I'm sure they will get back soon. So thanks, guys. You can lower your hands. I appreciate you. All right. So with that, we're going to jump into the second half of our meeting. So first, we're going to cover new board proposals to add new credits to R408. Then we will jump into board proposals to change existing R408 credits. And then finally, we will go through board proposals to change R408 credit values themselves. So that's where we're headed in the second half of our meeting today. And so looking at the new credits that the board has proposed, we have 6 proposals, 5 general categories of proposals that were submitted for new credits. And what you guys might notice is that some of these align with the C406 credit options that were voted on and discussed on the commercial side as well. So we're going to start with the first 2 proposals, which were around adding a debiasing credit. And this is Kim and Adam or Will. And so Kim, will go to you first. And I think what we'll do for this is have both of you share your proposals and then we'll move to a discussion about debiasing. So Kim, I will pass it over to you to kick us off.
I think we had so much discussion around this in the commercial area. I think I can defer maybe to Adam and Will to speak first. And if there's anything I want to add, I can do that.
Sure.
That works in the interest of time.
Absolutely. Adam or Will, I'm not sure which one of you is advocating for this.
Yeah, I'll speak to this one. I mean, I think to Kim's point, I think we've talked about this one to death a little bit. I think the point here is just to make sure there are credits that acknowledge relative efficiency of equipment relative to an absolute baseline as opposed to a like for like equipment baseline, just like we talked about in commercial. So that is what we are advocating here.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. Kim, anything to add?
I think only that just that there was a proposal from RMI that supported this measure that could be very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Okay, so I think what we'll do is just open up the floor for questions and discussion. If folks have any questions for Adam or Kim, or would like to share their thoughts on this proposal, please feel free to raise your hand. Kristen.
Question for Kim. How would you like to incorporate some of the suggestions from RMI? And it seemed like they had a coalition of supporters on that letter too into this.
I'm not sure that I can answer that question right now without looking at it in more detail. Because from reading through it and discussions with RMI staff, they seem to have a whole lot better handle on how to incorporate or suggestion of what to do here than I could have come up with. So I was just kind of referring to what they had proposed in my suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And Kim, can you just remind the board that proposal was found in the public comment form or the board proposal form?
Oh, gosh.
I believe it's a public comment form and it was kind of in the middle, like comment 10 or 11 or so.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay. Any other board questions, comments? Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, thanks. I'd be in full support of this, just primarily because it's an option to be able to do that and to be in alignment with what we did, if I recall correctly, through the commercial side of things. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Any other board member thoughts before we move to a straw poll? Okay, not seeing any hands. So I think the idea here is that, and I guess this was not shared by Kim or Adam, but my interpretation of these proposals is that there was interest in a debiasing credit for heating and for water heating. And if you guys could just clarify if that intent is correct, that would be great, because we have polls for both, and I just want to make sure we're asking the right question.
That's correct on our end.
Same here.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, guys. Okay, so the first question is, does the board want to add a debiasing credit for space heating? I will say, without the specifics, this straw poll would be to give guidance to our team and CEO to figure out what this looks like, leveraging the RMI proposal and baking it into the first version of the code for you all to react to. So just keeping it at that sort of higher level right now, this is just direction for us to include debiasing and figure out what that looks like. Andrew?
Yes, good morning. Question. I'm sorry, I was a minute late getting back. So for any credit conceptually, would everything else have to be de-weighted for any additional credit? Is that the intent, or is that a TBD?
I might ask Adam and Kim, based on RMI's proposal, if you think that would be the outcome or not.
I don't know that necessarily other credits would be de-weighted. I think that this might, and we might have to, if the board agrees to do this conceptually here, similar to what we did in commercial, I think there's not as clear cut of a path to do this because there are so many different heating and cooling credits in residential, whereas in commercial there was relatively one that made sense to align this with. So Andrew, I guess we might need to hold off on answering that question holistically right now, but certainly we will reflect on that before the draft that we send you all, and if there are concerns about needing to adjust other credits to accommodate this, we can certainly visit that at that time.
Yeah, and it just seemed easier to be more in the camp of additional credits may be desired if other credits, I don't think there's a reason to lower them.
And I don't think there would be either. I think in developing the credit values for what this credit would look like, we would probably ensure that it aligns generally with, again, the calculation method that Carolyn and others have talked about that is used to develop the calculations for the credits, and would adjust this accordingly. So it shouldn't result necessarily in any other credits being devalued. It might just change how this one is calculated, not change how it's calculated, but this one might be calculated with the same methodology and have different values.
Now, Adam, that helps. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Adam. Okay. So the straw poll for the board on the screen is, do you all want to add a device heating? The next straw poll will ask about water heating. So keep in mind, this is just for space heating. If you would like to add a debiasing credit, that's option A, yes. If you would not, that's option B, no. And then option C is abstain. So board members who would like to vote for option A, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you guys. I see 14 votes for option A. You can lower your hands. If you would like to vote no, option B, please raise your hand. And Zach, just checking, because I thought I saw your hand earlier. Is this can you just confirm which way your hand is voting?
A.
No,
A.
B, A, okay,
Yes.
wonderful.
Sorry, I'm sick.
No worries. Thanks for being here. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands for option B then. If you would like to vote option C, please raise your hand. Okay, Awesome. I see one vote for option C. And so we will move forward with including a debiasing credit for space heating. Second poll here is for water heating. So same options, just different equipment. So if you would like to add a debiasing credit for water heating, that's option A, yes. Please vote, raise your hand now. Keep them up. Okay, thank you. I see 15 hands for option A. You guys can lower your hands. Okay, if you would like to vote B to not accept this proposal, please raise your hand. And Will, I saw your hand vote for A, so I'm just going to confirm if you want to give me a head nod that that was where your vote was landing. Cool, thanks. Okay, no votes for option B. If you would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand now. Okay, awesome. See one vote for option C. So we will also move forward with a debiasing credit for water heating. Thank you, guys. And our next proposal here may get a little tricky. So I guess I just wanted to caveat that this proposal fell before we were able to talk about or ask the board about a proposal from Kim as well in section R403. So Kim, if you want to, we're not voting on the R403 proposal today, but if this will be a vote dependent on the outcome of that. So I just wanted to add that color. And Kim, if you don't mind kind of speaking to that element in your pitch, that'd be great.
Yeah, my goal with both this and the proposal for 403 is that for tiny homes, tiny apartments, super small buildings, an ERV, HRV is not necessarily the best way to provide mechanical ventilation. And the points are set up such, hopefully I'm explaining this correctly. So I was proposing to have other options be available instead of only ERV, HRV for mechanical ventilation for those tiny dwellings. So if we were to vote in support of that revision in 403, then I would propose that we adjust the points accordingly for tiny units in this table. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
We will find out. Maybe we'll just see what board members have questions, Kim, and then yeah, we can go from there. So Kristen, and then we'll go Tim, and then Ron.
Hi, I just wanted to share the experience of someone who lived in a 275 square foot tiny home, attached home for 6 years in climate zone 7. I did have a bathroom fan, and I think one of the alternative proposals is that, people could just rely on a bathroom fan or a kitchen fume hood to provide adequate ventilation, on the assumption that these units are rarely full-time occupied. But I just wanted to counter that they sometimes are. And what would happen in the wintertime is that, those fans tend to be noisy. So it would get turned off or it would not provide adequate ventilation. And my windows would almost immediately ice up, even after I replaced them with triple pane. So it was necessary to actually open a window in order to provide ventilation. And that, of course, skyrocketed my, at the time, electric heating bill. It was still low overall because it was such a tiny space. But in my experience, I do support exemptions by and large for tiny homes. But I do think that it's really a health and safety issue in addition to an energy conservation measure. So I would support encouraging, at the very least, ERVs and HRVs in tiny homes, especially because CO2 and fume buildup can really happen very quickly in addition to condensation issues. Thank you.
Kristen, can I ask you a follow-up question? Because I know one of the concerns here that people bring up that I don't feel like I've researched adequately is whether there are ERV, HRVs that are sized appropriately.
Yeah, look at the Lunos for new construction. I think that could be a nice option. It's very small. It does meet the efficiency requirements that are referenced in the code. It's not incredibly expensive. On the flip side, there aren't a lot of builders that have experience with that, but the tiny home community is kind of niche, and I think this is a popular one. That being said, I'm open to alternative proposals here, but I just wanted to share that experience with the board.
What was the model that you said? I missed that.
It's called Lunos.
Lunos. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, Tim.
Thank you. One comment and then one question. My comment would be, in my opinion, this discussion should be happening in alignment with the discussion on an exception. In other words, when we get to that point talking about small, tiny dwelling units, I think it'd be appropriate at that point to be bringing up some of the other code ramifications or exceptions that go with that. So I think this is a little premature to be talking about this and voting. And then my question would be, why is it just for 6, 7, and 8? So this would not even be applying to Broomfield or Front Range 5. Thanks.
It's for 6, 7, 8 because those are the only, I believe those are the only regions that get the points in the table.
Those are the only climate zones in which an ERV or HRV is required by the code.
There we go. Thank you, Adam.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Ron, and then we'll go home.
Thank you. So I guess, the ventilation air is essential no matter what size the house is. And so I think it's really important that we don't do things that reduce the likelihood people are going to have these systems or use these systems. I think the Lunos is actually a really good solution. There's also a couple of major manufacturers like Panasonic that make very small freestanding self-contained units that kind of like slightly oversized bath fans, but with a single hole. They're really easy to use and they work great for small spaces. They're not as efficient as the full-size systems, and they're not perfect by any means, but there are technical solutions out there for tiny homes. Since we are seeing more and more interest in tiny homes, I'm expecting manufacturers are going to be putting out devices that work with these things, especially by the time this code gets to really hit the streets. I'm expecting to see most major manufacturers have devices that'll work in tiny homes, even more so than they already do. So I would say that this is something we should keep in the code.
And maybe I can clarify, my proposal for 403 is not to remove that there's a mechanical ventilation requirement. It's just to add options for the tiny homes. But I also recognize the efficiency of ERV and HRVs, and if there are not enough options out there on the market that people can choose, then I would withdraw the proposal. So, but I do agree with Tim that maybe this conversation is best held when we talk about the proposal for 403, because it could be a moot point.
Okay. I think that sounds good, and I hope would love to hear your thoughts.
The only thing I kind of want to caution is there's an awful lot of talk about revolving around ventilation and taking a look at it. This proposal is very specific to the requirement in 403 that says the climate zones 6, 7, and 8 are required to have an ERV or HRV. The requirement for whole house mechanical ventilation comes out of the IRC, which is a different code, which you do not have purview over. And they have very specific items in there to make sure that we're getting the correct ventilation and the ventilation that's needed for the various sizes of homes. And it's the amount of ventilation and so forth really is dependent on the house side or the dwelling size unit. So I caution you that you could inadvertently really be messing up other areas and other codes and causing more problems than what was, good heartfelt intentions trying to do.
Thanks, Hope. So synthesizing what I heard from the board, it sounds like, Kim, maybe we move this proposal to, as a follow-up question to the proposal you made in R403. flagging again that if since we're kind of moving to a home size discussion next meeting, we may not get to discuss that. So we will likely need to send a follow-up survey on these questions, but we'll move this question and proposal there and continue on.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Thanks, Kim. Okay, next up I've got Kristen. So Kristen, over to you.
Hi, this is a reflection to try and create some parallelisms between commercial and residential code. I had put forth a proposal that was accepted for commercial to provide a credit for people who opt to choose an air conditioner or heat pump, ideally, with a low GWP refrigerant. The same kind of opportunity does exist in residential. Where EPA, under a recent final rule, allowed a global warming potential for refrigerants for these systems to use up to 700 GWP. However, there are lower GWP options available now and coming onto the market. And I would add, including for heat pump water heaters, which is pretty exciting. So happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Kristen. Questions, comments from the board? Okay, not seeing any. I know we had already discussed this one on the commercial side, so let's just move ahead to the straw poll. If the board wants to add a credit for low GWP refrigerants, option A is yes, we'd like to add that credit. Option B is no, we would not like to add that as a credit. And option C is abstain. If board members would like to vote for option A, please raise your hand now. Wonderful. Okay, I see 14 hands for A. If board members would like to vote for option B, please raise your hand now. Brad, confirming that that is a option B vote hand. Brad, is your hand up for option A or option B? And if you are responding to me, I apologize, you're on mute. Okay, I think it was option A, is when I saw your hand go up the first time. So please correct me in the chat if that is incorrect. So 0 votes for option B. If a board member would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Okay, 0 votes for option C. So we will move forward with adding a credit for low GWP refrigerants. Alrighty, and Kevin, you are up next, so pass it over to you.
Great. So we had just suggested this as a possible credit for somebody that would want to use evaporative cooling. That there's, Adam and I talked about this a little bit. We found some resources, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's some language we can pull in from other codes, but it would just allow, credit for somebody that either in a mountain climate, this could really be any of our climate zones, I think, because it's such an effective cooling method in this climate. And because it's so very low energy, it feels like I suggested that this should be available as a credit option.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kevin. We'll open up to the board questions or comments. So Tim, over to you first.
Thank you. Yeah, I support this, but quick question for Kevin. Would that be like having a footnote or something to say that that would be the only cooling allowed, or could it be in conjunction with other cooling? I would be in support of only having the evap cooling to get the credit.
It's a good question, Tim. I don't know that we thought it through in that much detail, but I'm inclined to. I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you that it should be only evaporative cooling, because if you have it there and you get this credit, but you don't use it, and you just flip on your DX unit instead, that defeats the purpose.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Kevin. Ron, did you want to add?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I fully agree with that, because we have plenty of temperatures where evaporative cooling can get what we need to achieve comfort. But we also have days where the temperature differential exceeds what's possible with evaporative cooling. And so I do think people who have evaporative coolers enjoy the lower energy bills associated with those systems. And so they might, I could imagine many scenarios where they might have evaporative cooling and compression-based cooling, and maybe use them both. So I'm not sure if I'm completely sold on the all or nothing.
That's a fair point, Ron. Yeah, I mean, I could imagine somebody that gets through, maybe up to 90 degrees just fine, but when it tips into the hundreds, they say, pull out the big guns.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ron. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, like under it gets a little tricky under the IMC. Evaporative cooling isn't technically mechanical cooling. Like it doesn't qualify as mechanical cooling, which is weird, but go figure by the definition. But I do support this. I don't know that it should be hugely valued. I mean, like if we look at the cooling credits that we were just looking at, it's only 1 point to go to high efficiency cooling. That I think it's a great idea to add that, but I also don't want for it to necessarily be credit to not install cooling for homes, because there's some equity concerns around that. So I like this idea, but I'd say proceed with caution and don't get too strict.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. So other questions or comments from the board? Kristen?
Would you consider limiting the climate zone that this could apply to, such that people aren't earning credits if they're installing an unnecessary evaporative cooler or no cooler up where it's not really necessary?
Well, sorry, having audio troubles. I would think that my hesitation with that, Kristen, would be that I think somebody that might be climate zone 6 or 7 even, that says, I'm going to have this because I don't have a conventional air conditioning unit. And as we've seen, mountain towns more and more now do need some kind of cooling. And that'd be my hesitation, is I feel like that could be the thing that takes the edge off of, your 95-degree day in Summit County or something like that. If we,
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, guys. Elizabeth?
And sorry, one other thing just occurred to me. Air conditioning is DX, and of course that's the exact same equipment that runs our heat pump. So if we are saying that we want to credit evaporative cooling by not installing DX, you're also saying don't install a heat pump, because by default, if you have a heat pump, you have air conditioning. So again, I would say just proceed with caution.
Yeah, we did find some code examples. I can't remember. I'm looking at the one. It was Maryland's green construction code that had some. I think you're right. We need to thread the language pretty carefully, Elizabeth, but it does feel like it's a credit potentially.
I would definitely not restrict people from installing DX, because again, we want to encourage heat pumps, right? But perhaps it could be available to offset a certain percentage of the load or something like that.
Yeah. And I will say that the way which you guys will see later this afternoon when you see the commercial side, the way we structured it, when I was talking to Kevin about this, was to require that it would cover a certain percentage of the cooling load, but not the full cooling load. And I think, Elizabeth, that might address the concern you raised.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, so I think if in hearing board conversation, I think in moving forward with a straw poll here, this to approve this proposal will be to again show board intent to include a credit like this, and we can work offline to figure out how to best frame that, taking into consideration all of the concerns that were just raised, and then the board will have a chance to react to it in that first residential code draft. So this is not locking us into a specific way we would include this, but just to note that if this is approved, we can continue to think about the best way to add it into the code language. Okay. So with that, let's do a quick straw poll. A vote yes here is to accept the proposal and add a credit for evaporative cooling. A vote no is to not add a credit for evaporative cooling, and a vote C is to abstain. So we'll go through board members who would like to vote for option A. Please raise your hand. Okay, thank you guys. All right, I saw 8 hands, and I will add the +1 since Carolyn is off and she did agree with this proposal. So that's 9 votes for option A. If you'd like to vote no on this proposal, please raise your hand now. Okay, see 0 votes for option B, and if you'd like to abstain, please raise your hand now. Okay, and I see 5 hands for abstain. So that is a majority with 9 voting for option A. And so we'll move forward with working this language into the residential draft. All righty, and our last new credit option that we wanted to discuss today came from Jess. So Jess, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Kim. So it says on here, boilers aren't on this list. I think I have found boilers on this list. I'd be happy for any of our code experts to chime in when I am done and correct me. So I am looking at measure number R408.2.4, parentheses 1C, for ductless or hydronic thermal distribution. So depending on the climate zone, this measure awards between 7 and 10 points for the installation of ductless or hydronic thermal distribution systems. In climate zone 7, where I am located, and in fact, my home has a boiler baseboard. So it's a hydronic heating system. And many homes up here also have hydronic heating systems like this. So the measure value is 10 points. Regardless of the efficiency of the boiler. There is no efficiency prescribed within this code language. It's if you just install hydronic heating, you get the 10 points. So my proposal is that we treat boilers the same way that this code treats furnaces, and that there should be minimum requirements for high efficiency boilers, or sorry, points awarded for high efficiency boilers. So the code awards points, I think it's for 95% AFUE for a furnace and 97%. And I am proposing that we treat boilers similarly, especially for communities where cooling is less common, although to Kevin's point, perhaps becoming more requested, where we don't have, these ducted systems where hydronic heating is very popular.
Thanks, Jess. Okay, and we'll open it up to the board, comment, questions. So Kim, we'll start off with you.
I'll just express my full support for this, and thank you, Jess, for noting that boilers were not included. That was an oversight on my part in reviewing, because we have the same situation up here of it's all boilers for the most part.
Thanks, Kim. Elizabeth.
This might be a question for Hope, but I think boilers are just water heating equipment. So Hope, would that not fall under R408.2.3?
For what it's worth, I looked up today to see if boilers have UEF, sidearm tanks, and they don't, because they're not considered direct water heaters.
Hope, I see your mouth moving and you are on mute.
Typically a lot of times it'll include surface water heating, and then they also say space heating equipment, so that it's doing that double. I would have to go back and take a look at this further before I give you an absolute answer, Elizabeth.
I know in the commercial code, if it's water heating equipment, the code doesn't care if it's for space heating or domestic water heating. If it's water heating equipment, it is what it is. I don't know if what was meant by R408, but that's it is a defined term Boiler is not really a defined term in terms of space heating or water heating. It's a water heater still. And maybe this is just semantics, but it would go to where we add that in. I think the second part of that, as far as the like hydronic heating, that's intended to align with the efficient duct distribution, meaning you're limiting your distribution losses. So I think the credit there is still valid for hydronic heat delivery systems in the way that good efficient ductwork should be rewarded. And then whether we need to make sure that the capacity or the efficiency ratings of the water heating equipment are still included in R408, because it is mostly UEFs or COPs. We could definitely look at that, but I don't think that we should be taking away the credits for the hydronic, because that's intended to be a distribution credit per se.
And service water heating is water heating for purposes other than for comfort. So service water heating would not include a boiler that's being utilized to heat the space.
Thanks, Hope and Elizabeth.
Okay, great.
Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, Tom, I'll go to you.
Thanks. I think it's worth pointing out that if we're going to offer a credit, whether that's a new credit or offer a minimum thermal efficiency to do a condensing boiler, that the radiators will need to be designed to operate at low temperature. Otherwise, you'll never be able to operate the boiler at those temperatures where you're achieving those efficiencies. So I think those two things should be tied together if we're going to offer a credit for high thermal efficiency boilers. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Kim?
I guess this might be a question for Jess. The way I see the proposal would be to simply add the word boiler and a specific efficiency rating that would obtain credit anywhere that furnace is in the table. So that it's furnace or boiler. High performance gas furnace or boiler. That would be my interpretation of her proposal, but I just wanted to verify and see if that's in alignment.
I think that works for me. I think the issue with the code language is that the gas furnace options that are available in all of the climate zones, or in 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 specify gas furnace and cooling, and you wouldn't necessarily have that cooling option. But I mean, I think it could be worded in that way, certainly. And I frankly, I mean, to Tom's point, I'm not a boiler expert, but I'll say that my boiler in my house is 95% efficient. And I don't think that I have low temperature baseboards because my house was built in the 1980s and I guarantee they haven't been upgraded since then.
Okay, thanks. Elizabeth?
Yeah, Tom brings up an important point, and you could have an efficiency rating of 96%, and you won't get that efficiency rating if you're heating water to 180 degrees. I think most hot water baseboard is in the 150 to 180 degree range, which unfortunately, Jess, that means your boiler's probably not operating very efficiently if it's heating to 180. I don't know enough about baseboards to know if there is a system that operates at 140 or lower, but it would have to be 140 or lower to be in the condensing range. I think. I don't know if anybody's got expertise on that type of equipment.
They do offer those. It's just a lot more surface area, so that you can get lower temperatures and the same heat output.
So if we add that language, I think you're right. We'd probably have to have both.
I think it makes sense. And you'd be fine during most of the year operating at low temperatures with conventional heat pumps. I'm sorry, conventional boilers. Sorry, with low temperatures and conventional radiators. But on a design day, I think you might struggle with the lower surface area.
Okay. So it sounds like there's some interest in looking at this. I think there's also been some flags raised on how we might, and maybe questions about how this would land in our 408, and maybe some clarification that we need to understand, like where or how or if this is captured already. So Jess, are we still interested in kind of moving forward with this idea, and then we can work out on the back end what those specifics might look like?
Yeah, works for me.
Okay. Any other comments or questions before we do a straw poll? Kind of in the similar vein of all of these credits, stating an intention from the board to add this in, and then we'll do the homework on the back end to figure out a place for it and how it would fit in, considering all of the great flags brought up today. Okay, I'm not hearing any. So let's go to the straw. So again, this is the intention from the board to add some sort of credit in R408 for a high efficiency boiler. And we will work out what that looks like after the fact for you guys to react to. Option A, vote yes here, is to add, for us to add some level of credit in R408 for high efficiency boilers. Option B is no, not to add this credit. And option C is abstain. If the board would like to vote for option A, please raise your hand now. Okay, I see 12. There was a moment I saw 13 hands for option A, so we're going to go with 13. You guys can lower your hands. If you would like to vote for B, to not accept this proposal, please raise your hand. Okay, I see one vote for B. Thank you. You can lower your hand. And if you would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 0 votes for abstain. So that is a majority to move forward with adding the credit for high efficiency boilers. All right. Thank you guys. So with that, we're going to move into our next section, which is to review proposals to change existing credit requirements. And so this could be language or other small changes that folks wanted to see in section R408. And Adam, I am realizing Carolyn left and one of her proposals is in this section. Should we skip that for today?
Yeah, because I think if I'm recalling, it's one that I think we would need her to explain a little bit further. So if it was straightforward, I'd say let's do it anyway, but I don't think it is. So
okay, I was thinking the same thing. Okay, so we will follow up with Carolyn's proposals since she had to leave early. So I'm just writing that note down so we don't forget. Okay, so we did have 2 proposals here. One was from Carolyn and one was from Brad. And so Brad will just stick with yours today. So I'll skip through Carolyn's and
well, Kim, actually, I was thinking about a different one of Carolyn's. If you want to go back to Carolyn's for a second.
Oh, okay, does this one still, if you think?
Well, yeah. So I think we may want to understand, and maybe I think if we want to just talk about this one really quick, I think it might be a simple resolution and it might be a question for Hope, honestly. So if you want to scroll down to her proposal really, well, I guess we can address it, but Hope, I guess, so the proposal was that in table R408.2, there is under, oh gosh, R408.2.214 language in the table that says heat pump or high performance heat pump with electric resistance backup. And then when you go down to R408.2.214 and actually read the requirement of the credit, it doesn't actually specifically call out electric resistance heating at all. And so I guess the question is, it seems like there's a little bit of inconsistency there potentially. And if there are, Elizabeth, maybe you have some thoughts there.
Yeah. Yeah, since this seems to be my life this weekend last week is dealing with this for ERI modeling and Denver code modeling and stuff like this. I've actually learned quite a bit about this. I think when we say, capacity ratio, 70% of your heating capacity at 5 degrees, that means that your heat pump is still operating, but you can't necessarily meet the full load at 5 degrees, and you are allowed to use some type of backup. It doesn't specify here whether it's electric resistance or gas. But obviously, I think we all know the capacity diminishes as the outside air temperature gets lower. But if you can design to still have 70% of your capacity met by your heat pump at 5 degrees, you're meeting this requirement.
Right. So inherently, by saying with electric resistance, they're just assuming that you will have backup and that it will use electric resistance as the backup in the table, even though it doesn't specifically say it here in this requirement.
Correct. I think it's implied, although it doesn't specifically say you couldn't use gas.
Right. Well, I guess that was more, yeah. I think Carolyn's proposal was about saying that you shouldn't have to have backup at all. And so perhaps that's the aspect that we revisit later, but I think the question was more around, it calls it out in the table. It doesn't specify that other fuel sources couldn't be used as backup in that credit. So
yeah, I guess you could just strike the quote with electric resistance backup or with electric resistance and just say with backup.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that still may be something we need to have Carolyn on to explain, because I don't want to put words in her mouth about what she was actually advocating for. But just wanted to see if that was just like an inconsistency, if we could correct it. But it seems like perhaps it's not just an inconsistency and we need to address it.
Yeah, if we were to delete that, we would have to rephrase the rest of the credit, because you can't meet only 70% of your load without doing something else about it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Kim, so I guess we can just revisit this one later then.
Okay. But Adam, I think that was helpful. So thanks for bringing that up and talking through that. Okay. So Brad, now I will pass it over to you. Thank you.
Also noting Brad was having microphone issues earlier, so it's possible they have recurred.
It was working for a moment there, Brad. Shoot. It is now not working, it seems.
So Brad, I mean, I guess potentially an alternative is if we can skip to other topics, and then if you want to either fix your headset or you can type out your explanation in the chat that we can read aloud, and then go from there.
Okay, I think he's looking at swapping out headphones. So Brad, I'll just give you a couple more seconds to reconfigure, because we're moving on to a new section after this. So I just want to make sure we've given you a chance. Or move on. Yeah, Kim.
Maybe while he's trying to fix that audio, I had a suggestion in my survey, but it may be a moot point. I guess my question was, is there a way in the code for a home that has higher efficiency windows installed to receive more credit than what is in the table for 408?
So Kim, that is coming in the next section. We saved the changes to existing credit point values as our final section for today. So it is captured, and we'll get there very soon.
I was just going through order in the document, and that wasn't sure where that was. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. Okay, Brad, checking in. If not, we will.
How about now?
Woohoo! We can hear you.
Yeesh. Okay, bouncing back and forth today. Everything's falling apart. So this one has always been pretty simple for me, and it comes directly from having done assessments on hundreds and hundreds of homes. And whenever there's ductwork in an attic that is covered in insulation, it is often uncovered by people being within the attic or some disturbance within the attic. So in Fort Collins, we've always added that if we're going to consider ductwork inside of the building thermal envelope, that it should also be within the continuous air barrier and truly within the envelope of the house. So that's the reasoning behind this. If we're going to get credit for it, then I feel like if ductwork is inside conditioned space and within the building envelope, it should also be within the continuous air barrier.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Open up the floor. So Ron will go to you first.
Brad, so are you suggesting that we eliminate what is, I guess, often called deeply buried ducts from counting in this?
Yes, I am advocating for that.
Even if they have like a foam or something that prevents them from being easily disturbed?
Well, I suppose now we're into semantics. So I would say that if it's a foam, then that is within the continuous air barrier. Are you talking about like
an open cell foam, like an open cell foam
or closed cell?
Yeah.
Again, if it met the requirements of air tightness, so closed cell being 1.5, I think open cell 5.5 inches, I believe.
So if you had, let's say you had a situation where you had an air barrier in the main portion of the living space of the house, and then you put ducts in the attic, and then you bury those ducts in foam. So you have, would that be something you would call that within the air barrier?
I would call that within the air barrier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just want to point out that an option to, have your ducts be defined as in the conditioned space, it's not just burying the ducts in its insulation. The ducts have to be insulated themselves, and they have to be buried, and they have to be tested to a tightness which is twice as tight as a duct that is within the conditioned envelope. I also just want to throw out that detail aligns with Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready Homes requirements. So the EPA thinks it's okay. So I don't want to deviate from that standard.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Andrew?
Yes, thank you. I also agree with Elizabeth. We currently undertake, excuse me, deeply buried ducts in conformance with Energy Star and don't seek to change, at least currently change.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. All right. Other questions for Brad or thoughts about this proposal that the board would like to share before we straw poll? All right, I'm not seeing any hands. So with that, we will go to a straw poll. So the question here is, do you all want to add the language as outlined on this slide and within the continuous air barrier for the two options within R408? So this is the option for 100% of the ductwork inside the conditioned space and 80% of the ductwork inside the conditioned space. Ron?
I just want to ask, would you be open to saying within a continuous air barrier? Because I guess what I'm worried with, people are going to get tripped up because the main air barrier is not up in the attic, not involved with the ducts, but they have a secondary air barrier.
I think that stays within the intent, Ron. Yes, I would be open to that.
There shouldn't be more than one air barrier in the house, though.
You can have lots of air barriers. You don't want more than one vapor barrier.
Which brings up my concern when you start talking about making sure that somebody doesn't just utilize plastic up on that ceiling, because if you've got, depending on how you're doing that attic, you put that vapor barrier on that ceiling location and you can have some issues with it. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I guess at this point, I'm sort of hesitant to deviate too far from the definitions that are being used in the Zero Energy Ready Home program. I think those were carefully thought out. They seem to be working. We've been using them in Boulder County for a long time. I could imagine this confusing things and people doing things without proper understanding of what they're doing and creating some really unfortunate situations up there if the community isn't used to how to think about this.
Okay, thanks, Ron. All right. Appreciate those final comments and questions. So moving back to our straw poll, does the board want to include within the continuous air barrier in the proposed sections? A vote for option A is yes, you would like to include this language. A vote for option B is no, you would not like to include this language. Vote for option C is to abstain from the vote. So if board members would like to vote for option A, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 2 hands. Thank you, guys. You can lower. If board members would like to vote for option B, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 9 votes for option B. Thank you, guys. And board members would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. And I see 3 abstains. Okay. All right, so the majority is to not accept proposal. So thank you guys for the question and discussion. So we're going to move now into our final section on changes to existing credit points. And Adam, oh, sorry, my timer went off to keep everybody focused. Adam, I wanted to ask you again, I think a couple of these proposals are from Carolyn, and if we eliminated those, we might be able to get through the straw polls on the rest of these. Any thoughts on if we want a straw poll or just do the board proposals for this final section?
I think we can. The one that I was thinking about earlier was the one that I definitely think requires some additional explanation for, I don't want to put words in her mouth as to what she's advocating for. So I think we can skip that. I don't remember, did she have more than one?
She did. She had 2, Rob had 2, and Kim had 1.
Okay. The other one I'm not remembering.
Or Carolyn had 4, sorry. Carolyn
4.
had many.
Yeah. I think potentially adding points for efficient appliances and lighting efficiency are more straightforward. I don't think there's a lot of room for interpretation there, but certainly the evaluation of renewable energy points and allowing ground source heat pumps, to achieve the amount of points necessary. I think there's a lot of nuance to those.
Okay, so why don't I suggest this? Rob, we'll get through your 2, Kim will get through yours since you guys are here and can advocate for your positions today. We'll straw poll those 3, and then if we have time, we can go circle back to Carolyn's proposals. So I think we'll move ahead with that. I will skip this because we'll do the straw poll, so we'll keep with our same format. So Rob, I will pass it over to you for this first proposal.
Yeah, this might be moot at this point in time with the discussion earlier about additional points for high performance water heating. The objective here is to kind of address some of that biasing issue towards gas water heaters. This is specifically for gas storage water heaters, not heat pump water heaters, with the idea being to try to normalize those UEFs between a gas storage water heater versus a heat pump, a similar storage heat pump water heater.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
Kim, I might just offer here on Rob, I would ask, do you feel like this was adequately addressed in the debiasing question? If you do, then we can move on. If not, if there's other aspects of this that you want to address, we certainly want to do that. But
how about this? I abstained from the other vote because I feel like the effect that it would have on the points was too ambiguous for me to give the recommendation on the points was too ambiguous for me to provide any serious structure to it. So I guess I'll that's how I'm kind of approaching this. Is I'm not convinced that the other vote directly addressed storage water heat. I'm open to getting feedback from my fellow board members on if they feel that it does.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. So yeah, let's open up board discussion questions. We'd love to know folks' thoughts. So Tim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks. Rob, and you said this, I missed it, but what would the points start out? What are they currently, and then reduced to 75%, what would they be?
Kim, maybe we can just pull up the table.
Yep.
And show what that would be.
Here we are. And this, can someone direct me to which number we are looking at?
408.2 there they are at the bottom.
There they are. Got them right here. So it's Rob, this one, this one, this one, and this one.
Well, the
Storage.
second
I see.
part,
Yep.
the second two are part of the would have those. I mean, we might as well have the whole discussion right now.
Yeah.
For storage, gas storage water heaters, it's having the points, and for instantaneous, or it's cutting points by 3/4 for gas fired. Instantaneous water heaters, it's cutting by 50%. Again, that's trying to normalize that's an attempt to start normalizing their UEFs.
Give everyone a second to process. And as you guys have thoughts or questions, raise your hands. Kristen.
Thoughts on the load shifting potential of storage water heaters and how to make sure that that doesn't get lost in this. I overall agree with your points.
To be clear, Rob, your proposal doesn't address electric storage water heaters, though, right?
Well, the electric storage water heaters, the 5 options that are on there would remain untouched, correct?
Right.
Thanks.
I guess 7 options would include storage.
Yeah.
I think I mean, as a utility, we're interested in the load management opportunities, but I don't think that's addressed within the code. That's directly addressed within the code. Well, it's beyond the scope of our discussion right now. How about that?
Adam, you got my question, the heart of it. Thanks.
Elizabeth.
And I apologize. I had some internet blinking issues there for a sec. But Rob, was the intent there because we've got like the same sort of point scale for gas as we do for electric?
Yes, it's to reiterate, it's taking a stab at trying to debias the gas here and try to normalize the UEFs a little bit, the points left based on UEF.
Got it. Okay, that was the part I didn't hear. Thank you.
Apologies. Sorry, yep. That's okay.
Okay. Any other board questions, comments? Yeah, Kim?
I guess if the point is mainly focused on debiasing, I'd like to consider it within this full scope of the discussion around how to address the code related to debiasing. So I'm feeling a little bit uncertain as to, I'm in support of the general idea, but I guess I'm feeling confused a little bit there.
So I do think in the debiasing conversation, Andrew brought up a question to pose to the team that was like, would this debiasing result in other credits lowering their point thresholds? And I believe we kind of landed in no, but it seemed to be some ambiguity in there and as how we figure it out. So
well, I think
remind what just happened. Yeah.
In reviewing whether other credits would be changed, that inherently relies on understanding that kind of normalization that Rob is talking about across electric equipment and non-electric, well, electric heat pump equipment, and then resistance storage equipment and non-electric equipment, normalizing the efficiency of that equipment. And so I think inherently all of these have a potential to change, but it wouldn't necessarily be weakening or reducing the number of credits that are available for them, but perhaps increasing the number of credits for others, or doing something along of that nature, but creating that normalization across all of these, which is why I think from our perspective, I would also be hesitant to do that on just a subset of these credits, because I think if we agree here to reduce these by 75% and the instantaneous water heaters by 50%, then you kind of get into a, well, does that fit in with the normalization of what we're doing across all water heating? Does it fit in within, you know, if that makes sense? So I think that Kim, you and I might be sharing a similar hesitation here.
I will say I was just looking back at the RMI proposal for debiasing, and if I'm understanding it correctly, there is a item in there that addresses that this table would need to be adjusted as well. The actual credit values that they have entered are TBD, so not specific, but there is an acknowledgement that this table would need to be addressed.
I think where I'm headed, like the reason I think this is different is that I feel like this is on the topic of kind of debiasing and encouraging measured electrification, is that this feels like it's a nudge, and it feels like the RMI proposal is more of a shove. And I want us to be cognizant of the effect that the perception. I want to be cognizant of the fact that that we can create as ambitious a code as we want, but if it's too ambitious or too unenforceable, we're going to struggle to get this code adopted widely. And that's a point I've made before, and I think it's a point I'm going to continue to come back to.
And just to be clear, I would also say that just because the board indicated moving in the direction of debiasing for space heating and water heating, and just because the RMI proposal was raised as one proposal that was submitted to do that, does not mean that we are wedded to the RMI proposal in the way in which we do that. And so just wanting to clarify that part as well, as if the board is more interested in, say, reducing the number of points for non-electric or non-heat pump equipment to try to do that normalization, I think that that's another way to explore that. So I guess maybe Rob, maybe where I would ask if you would be comfortable is more discussing the voting of like reduction of these points in concept, rather than being like wedded to a 75% reduction or a 50% reduction as like the strategy to align.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I picked those numbers. The overarching point is generally correct. I picked those totals to try to get somewhere in the ballpark of making sure the UEFs were roughly aligned.
Okay, awesome. So what I might do here is change the straw poll to, does the board want to cut instant and storage gas water heater points?
I think I think the question now before the board is a little bit more broad than that. I think the question is, I think the RMI proposal is to increase point totals for electrification. And I think this is more broadly, do we want to be more, I guess I use the word surgical, but it doesn't feel like it's right. Or do you want to be more intentional about modifying points to normalize electric and gas? Or normalize measures, normalize electric versus gas measures.
Okay. Does that look right to you, Rob? I think I captured what you had stated.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, amazing. So, Andrew, I'll go to you and then we can move to our straw poll.
Yes, I mean, probably need to hear this again, or maybe 2 or 3 more times. What's the purpose of being punitive to gas currently for many that operate on an entitlement in a site development timeframe that can't adapt as far? Now, I can more understand wanting to increase points for electric, but to decrease points for many homes that may not have been permitted, but the intent has already been established, and most jurisdictions have already approved the infrastructure or planning that is coming. It seems not appropriate to look at this in that manner, to de-weight points for gas if the efficiencies are there.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. All right, and with that final comment, I think we could go ahead and move to the straw poll, if that's okay with everyone, because I would love to get through Kim's proposal before we wrap today. Following the reworded proposal here, does the board want to, sorry, there's 2 twos in that. Does the board want to be more intentional about modifying points to normalize electric versus gas measures? And so this will be kind of taken in the context of the debiasing as we kind of look holistically at the points when we're drafting this code. So the answer, option A, is yes, we would like to be more intentional about this and normalize between electric and gas. A vote for B is no, we would not like to make any changes, and vote for C is to abstain. So option A, if board members would like to vote for option A, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you guys. I see 7 votes for option A. You guys can lower your hands. If you would like to vote for option B, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 1 vote for option B. You can lower your hand. Thank you. And then option C, folks would like to abstain from this vote. Please raise your hand. Okay, so that is 6 votes for abstain. So looking at just a simple majority, that would lean towards option A. So we can take that in the context of the debiasing proposal, and we'll come back to you guys with something to react to.
Kim, Andrew, what was the total for A?
The total votes for option A was 7 votes.
So if I were to change my vote from B to C, what does that do?
Yeah, Kim, I think it's not based on a plurality, it's based on a simple majority. And of the people, well, I guess, so wait, how many do we have voting total? Did anyone vote for B?
There were 14 votes total, 1 vote for B, 6 votes for C, 7 votes for A.
Okay, well, by that definition, then A did not receive a simple majority. So that's an even split, because a simple majority requires 50% plus 1. So
okay,
You want to have a revote?
I mean, based on that, if anyone wants to reevaluate their vote.
I'd like to change my abstention to a vote for A.
Okay, so that would mean A has 8 votes, B had 1 vote, and C has now 5 votes.
Okay, well then that is a simple majority. So
okay, thank you. Sorry for my misstatement, everybody. Thanks for that flag, Andrew. I appreciate it. Okay, we're going to quickly scoot through Carolyn's, which we can follow up with outside of this meeting. And I would like to move to Kim's for the final proposal. I will say we have about 10 minutes left and a couple key informational pieces for you guys. So let's, as much as possible, keep the conversation tight on this one. So Kim, over to you.
Maybe I should just rephrase the question that I asked earlier. Because if this is already addressed someplace else in the code, then it's moot. But I guess I'm curious as to whether there's credit that can be obtained from some other mechanism within the code for homes that choose to have better U-value performance for their glazing than is required and is in the table. Okay. And if not, I'll go forward with my proposal.
Yeah, Elizabeth, jump in.
Would the first section of R408, that's the UA allowance, suffice? That's all envelope, but there's 3 levels, like 10% better, Sorry, is that right? It's there it is. Lots of levels. 5, 7.5, 10, 15, 20, 30. So on and so forth. And I guess there is, what's that? Oh, the next one down. Maybe does that suffice? E-Vector and SHGC for Windows?
That's the one I'm addressing right there. And I guess I'll go forward with my thought process here and let the discussion play out of, because we see in my area, at least, so many homes, in particular large homes with a large amount of glass. And that glass has such a big impact on the heating load and overall energy use of the home. It felt to me that if homes were to have a better U factor, I think the U factor required for at least high altitude or climate zone 6 through 8 is 0.25, whereas what's available can go down to 0.15, 0.1. So it felt like 1 point across the spectrum of what's available didn't feel sufficient as far as encouraging people to choose better and better glazing, especially if they were to have a high percentage of glazing for their homes. So that was the thought process behind the idea, to increase or add rows to encourage people to get higher, better performing windows.
Thanks, Cam. Okay, I know it's processing time, but questions, comments from the board on this proposal? Andrew and Kristen, and I would just say again, please, everyone, keep your comments very brief if possible.
I'd concur that the value isn't sufficient, particularly being the cost to encourage people to do better windows. So more value should be given. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Kristen, did you, your hand got lowered?
I second what Andrew just said.
Wonderful. Thank you. Brad?
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say we always look at like the big 3 impacts on building energy use, and windows are typically the highest factor in energy use.
Thanks, Brad. All right. I will go ahead and clear this and come back to here. Oh. All right. Any other board comments or questions before we vote? Elizabeth?
Just question on your vision there. Are you thinking like a second level of performance, or are you saying we should increase the performance requirements to get that point?
I think what I'm envisioning is something that's scaled. So like it's 1 point for every 0.05 better, if I'm doing the math right, or some sort of scaled tier so that you could get increased number of points for, say, 0.2 for your windows. Or if you get 0.15 for your U value, then it's 3 points or
Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. So with that, I think I'm going to move us to the straw poll, if that's okay, just so I can make sure we wrap up on time. And so does the board want to add credits for homes with high performance glazing? I think in vein of what Kim shared, adding a tiered sort of scaled approach to it. So if you would like to accept this proposal, the vote is option A. If you would not, vote for option B. And to abstain, please vote for option C. Jess, and then we can go. Are we voting already? Sorry. Okay, I think people are voting. So if you'd like to vote for option A, raise your hand. All right, I see 12 hands for option A. Thanks, everyone. You can lower your hands. Option B, please raise your hand. All right, I see 1 vote for option B, and then option C, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks. So that is 12 to accept, 1 no, and 1 abstain vote for that. So we will move forward with including those additional credits. Thank you, everybody. So I might be a bit of a speed talker in these last few slides to make sure I cover all the information I need to give you guys before we wrap up. But the biggest thing, most important thing is that you guys are going to be receiving the first draft of the commercial code language this afternoon. This will either come from Allie, myself, or Molly, so keep an eye out for that email. You guys will have a full month to review this code package and provide your proposals and comments. We are asking that you give those to us no later than Monday, November 4th at 8 a.m. So if you need to, that will be in the email, but if you need to put a calendar reminder on your calendar, do it now. We are going to ask, as you guys review the code language, to outline your proposals in one of two ways. The first option is if you is to actually make a redlined change within the document that we send you on what you want to change, and very, very importantly, include a rationale for why you want to make that change. The second option, if you're not a code language person, if you've never written code before, and you still want to suggest a change, please just include a very, very clear description of what you would like to change, and again, include your rationale. So we've got sort of two pathways. If you're not a code writer, don't feel like you need to be a code writer to suggest these changes. We just need clear direction and understanding there. Once we get all of that input from you guys, November 4th, we're going to compile all those proposals into a document to send you all. And at a future meeting, depending on how many proposals we get, we may have to have a conversation with the board about how we want to manage all of those in our very limited meeting time. So that's a discussion to be had. But biggest thing to note is that we will be sending you guys the commercial code proposals, or excuse me, the commercial code draft today. And we really look forward to your review. The other thing I wanted to note here is that there are a couple of sections of the commercial code that are sort of in TBD language. We will outline those sections for you in the email we send to you guys. And Adam is working very hard to try to fill in those blanks before we send this code package out to the public. The majority of the code is in place. There were just a couple pieces that still needed a bit of fleshing out before we felt comfortable sharing it. So we'll note those sections so you guys are aware of those as you're looking through the code. Okay, so the other thing we wanted to do before we wrap up today is Adam and I were looking at the calendar and trying to understand how all of this is going to happen and how we're going to get it all done before the end of the year. And so we currently have a meeting on our calendar for Thursday, December 12th from 9 to 11 a.m. And our team was wondering if we might be able to push this meeting back to Tuesday, December 17th from 11 to 1 p.m. The reason is just to give our team more time to collect all of the residential code proposals, compile them, and get them back to you guys and with enough time to sufficiently look through them before this meeting. So I would ask you guys to quickly pull up your calendars, take a look at that Tuesday, and I would just love if folks could raise their hand if that rescheduled time would work for you. Keep your hands up, please, as you guys are checking so I can track. Ron, your hand does not want to stay up for whatever reason. I see you. For those not raising your hand, do you guys have a conflict that is unmovable during that time? I don't want to be rescheduling this meeting when folks, can't make it, and we're happy to send a follow-up poll if it's not that easy. So I think that was sort of Zach, Kate, Andrew, Kristen.
I'm having
I had my hand raised
so I'm
earlier.
just not too sure.
Oh, you did. Thanks, Andrew. I'm sorry, Zach. What was your note there?
I'm having some back surgery. I'm just not too sure when.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Zach. Kate?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if these are meetings that it's across a bunch of meetings that I have. So I'm trying to figure out if those are ones I can change.
Okay. Adam, I mean, do we think we should maybe follow up with a scheduling pulse for this, or
So I think we nearly, we had 10 votes and Will and I didn't vote, but one of us will be there too. So technically we have 11 there. So I think what we could do is hold like a tentative for that date. And then I think, if we could get some feedback, Kate, if you're able to look into, moving those, or like other folks who had potential issues, that's something we could explore. I think the main reason behind this is just we want to make sure we have enough time to get everything to you all and have you all have enough time to review things before we're asking things back from you. So realizing that it may not work for every single person, but like there is a method behind the madness.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. So I like that approach. We'll send a calendar hold, and then we'll ask board members when we send that to let us know if you guys have any unmovable issues with that change. Okay. Quick reminders. I know it's 2 o'clock. If you've got to jump, no worries. We will send these slides. Our next meeting is Thursday, October 17th. Our plan was R403. We'll probably shift that to home size discussion. We will send an agenda out ahead of time so you guys can be prepared. And then a couple quick reminders. So the residential follow-up survey is due next Monday at 8 a.m. We just sent a model code survey out to the board yesterday. You guys have until October 21st to get that back to us. And then finally, the commercial code draft will be sent to you guys today. And we're asking for that review on November 4th. So prioritization, I would ask that you start with residential follow-up, move to model code, and then move to the commercial draft. And thank you all for your attention to all of these various surveys. We know it's a lot, and we are really appreciative of you guys working on this offline. Andrew?
Yes, a quick question. When do you anticipate a draft residential with the current schedule?
Yeah, we plan to have the draft residential. I believe I can look at our syllabus. I want to say it's like November 8th.
November 12th, I believe.
November 12th.
Yeah,
Yep.
It'll be the day after Veterans Day, Andrew.
Okay.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, if you guys have any questions, feel free to stick on. We're happy to answer those. Sorry for being a couple minutes late, but thank you guys, as always, for your participation, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I'm still here.
Hi, Jess.
Okay. Back to thermal distribution. So if that doesn't cover boilers, I'm realizing then if anybody is installing hot water boiler baseboard or inflow radiant heat,